Trinity Episcopal Church. It's Tuesday, March the 31st, 2020. This is my midweek check-in and meditation, so I hope you enjoy it. First three items for an update. As you may know, we're going to be doing Holy Week in a bag, and those bags have been delivered to 5 delivery points throughout the region. And there's information in This Week at Trinity last week, and it will be this week about where those pickup points are. If you have a directory, that would be okay as well. So the 5 pickup points are my house in Covington, Shannon and Greg Meinhardt's house in in Park Hills, Gina and Bob Russ's house in Edgewood, Paula and John Wolf's house in Florence, and Trey and Nancy Grayson's house in Walton. So those are the 5 pickup points. If you have a directory, you can look up our addresses. As I said, it's also available at This Week at Trinity last week and this week, and there's a link to it on our webpage as well to those pickup points. And I'll have a little video up about that shortly. Even if you don't have a bag, you can participate with Trinity in Holy Week, and there's another little video up on our YouTube page about that. I hope you will share that with friends and colleagues, neighbors, because we want to cast our net as widely to have people celebrate Holy Week with us, even if they don't have a bag. Lastly, an update about caring circles. We're going to be training our caring circle leaders tomorrow, April the 1st. There's 17 of them. And then they'll start contacting you to care for you. So watch for an update on that as well in This Week at Trinity. So I wanted to talk to you about what I preached on Sunday, which is prophecy. And I first want to share with you once again the 3 people that I have selected as my kind of prophets. So let's get the right book. Here's the right book. So it's Brene Brown's, I can't get this right, Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. So any of her books. She also has a new podcast called Unlocking Us, which is great as well. This is a book which changed my life about 20 years ago. It's Ed Friedman, A Failure of NERB, Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. And this is a wonderful book as well about how to see the world differently. And lastly is this book. It's Meg Wheatley, Who Do We Choose to Be? Facing Reality, Claiming Leadership, and Restoring Sanity, Margaret J. Wheatley. This is a great book. It's dense, and it's one of those books that you read a sentence or two, and then you have to sit and ponder it. So it's not for somebody who's impatient. You really got to have patience in order to read this book. So those are my three prophets. And in my sermon, I came up with sort of an ad hoc definition of prophecy, which I want to read. It's finding God's way to make true meaning in the midst of despair or indifference and acting on that truth. So finding God's way to make true meaning in the midst of despair or indifference and acting on that truth. So there's a contemplative part of it, and then there's an action part of it. And those two things cannot be separated. If you're acting without having not discerned deeply about what God is calling us to do, then you're not doing it. And then again, if you're just contemplating and then not acting, you're not a prophet either. So it's both those things. And I just want to lay out sort of 4 things that involves. So it involves wisdom and discernment, and I'll be talking more about that in the next weekly meditation about what wisdom is. But that's very important. It's not just knowledge, it's about wisdom. It involves vulnerability, and that means, for instance, asking the unanswerable questions and living with uncertainty. Uncertainty is part of vulnerability, and we'll say more about that in a couple of weeks. But the 2 questions I said we need to ask right now in the middle of this coronavirus life that we now have are, what can we learn from this? And we're not ready for an answer there. And how can we practice compassion? And that has not been fully answered yet because we're only at the beginning. So how can we practice compassion? It involves knowing history and scripture as a framework. So people who don't know history are doomed to repeat the past. And there's lots of history around how people responded in plagues and pestilence. It's in the Bible. It's certainly in our history throughout the centuries. And people are now looking, of course, to the flu pandemic of 1918 as one marker of how we might respond to that. And it involves prayer. And by prayer, I do not mean on your knees reciting the prayers, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, any of the prayers in the prayer book. That is one form of praying. But praying is conscious contact with God. And that may sound lofty and kind of airy-fairy, but I think it's about inspiration, being open to the Spirit, because to be inspired is to be influenced by the Spirit. And what can help with that are conscious meditative practices, and those are just sitting in silence or doing other things which might involve even exercise or things like that, that you're consciously contacting God and letting the Spirit into your life. And that ties back into vulnerability, because openness, to be open, not to be certain, not to know everything, to live a question is to be then vulnerable. So that's my quick meditation this week on prophecy. We'll explore it more in the weeks to come, and hope you like it. If you have suggestions of what you might want me to talk about, please email those to me. My address is rector@trinitycovington.org, rector@trinitycovington.org, and we'll see you in church.